let's jump into this. Let's start with helping people understand a little bit more of why you're qualified to be teaching this, why you're qualified to be having this conversation with me. Give us a snapshot of what makes your business unique.
Well, I mean, I guess this is one thing. You were asking me a funny fact, and I kind of thought about this, and whether this is funny or not. Hopefully, some people don't find this offensive, but I have actually, and it was funny. My wife noticed this the other day. She asked me, "Are you ever going to put some clothes on today?" And I said, well, I mean, I guess this is truly how you work in your underwear. I spent the whole day, and I spent a lot of my days just at home, pretty much, in shorts, sitting behind my desk while things are going on. My business is going on. I've got land development, new construction, rehabs going on, and I'm sitting at my desk in my shorts, and this is all happening. And I'm able to look at other ventures and do other things. So I guess that makes me qualified, if I can get business going without having to leave my chair that often, right?
Yeah, and I can totally relate to that too. Not only from my own perspective, but before we started recording, we're recording this over Skype, and I got to see you over video, and I can testify that that Alex likes to do business looking pretty rough.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. What else sets you apart besides the ability to kind of work from your home hub, looking any old way that you want to?
Yes, that's right. Well, basically, I've come up with a good system for dealing with motivated sellers that really brings the cream of the crop to the top. I didn't mean to rhyme that. Without having to do a whole bunch of legwork. I mean, a lot of people go into this business and they're like, well, where do I find the deals? And they are out driving around for dollars. And, there's not anything wrong with that at all. They're running to the courthouse to try to find foreclosure records, probate records, whatever. They're out maybe knocking doors for pre-foreclosures. They're, making all these offers on HUD properties and REO properties. And again, those are all great and wonderful things, but I've kind of found the way to kind of approach this from a more of a data-driven standpoint than actually trying to go out and do all these things and be present in all these different places. And found by doing that and by automating that really puts me in a position to where I can really control my own destiny, both financially and, just free time during the day and being with my family and all that good stuff.
All right, so let's jump into putting your finger on the pulse of an opportunity market. And I guess we've had some conversation along these lines. What do you think would be the best starting point for this conversation?
Well, normally this always boils back down to direct mail, but you could use this in making offers on properties without really even having to go look at them, whether you want to make REO offers or HUD property offers or whatever the case may be. Understanding the data that underlies any city or area in real estate puts you light years ahead of everything. A lot of people are just like blind. They're going to a market and they don't know what they're doing. They're making offers. Well, a lot of people, or a lot of times I hear investors, when people are looking for buyers to flip to their buyers list and, properties to their buyers list. I happen to be one of them because I'm a cash buyer. So my name appears in the public records data. So I get calls from people and they're like, well, how much will you buy the property for? What percentage will you buy it for? And what is your preference and all this stuff? And I actually get a little annoyed with that because I'm just like, I don't want to be on the phone answering calls for people who are, don't have any deals yet. And they're trying to just find out what my preferences are. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but you can find that out really easily because you could go to the data. You could go look at the property that I just bought. You can find out how many square feet it is. You can find out where it was. And you can find out how much I paid per square foot, which is another way to evaluate things that a lot of people don't look at. They look at what's the ARV, the after repaired value, or what percentage of the ARV will you pay? And I think it gets a little easier, though, if you break it down to square footage, because when you're looking at a whole bunch of different properties and whatnot, you can really say, okay, well, this was the average price per square foot that this area is going for. And if I'm going to make an offer and I want to make 10 grand or whatever it is, I've got to be, this far below the square footage on offers I'm making. And I really don't have to look at properties to be able to tell that, because the numbers don't lie. And that's what this whole thing is about. When you understand the data and you understand that numbers don't lie, you can sit at home in your underwear looking at your computer and you can weed through all the action that's going on and find out what's the best thing to do. A lot of people spend a lot of money on marketing and they don't know what they're doing, or they end up going to a list provider and they say, well, give me all the absentee homeowners or the absentee out-of-state owners, or give me all the free and clear, and you're just at the mercy of these people to pick data for you. Meanwhile, everybody and their mom is going to that same provider and you're all getting the same data and all getting the same results.
Okay, so part of what we're looking at here and trying to just break down exactly what we're trying to accomplish is how to see market data through a keener lens than just anyone who just buys a list from ListSource, right?
Absolutely.
Rather than taking a shotgun out there and just kind of going wide and big and loud and proud, you're saying, okay, how can we take this raw data and really just apply in many ways some common sense, which we'll see here, but also some insight into the crystal ball of the market and reverse engineering where the action is and what's going on without having to ask the people directly what they were thinking and what's going on.
You could ask them, but this, I mean, again, numbers don't lie. It'll show this is what they paid for the property. Yeah,
right.
It's right there in front of your face.
But there's a little bit of a kind of a reading of the tea leaves, is my sense here, when you do this, because it doesn't require you to, like you said, to make a bunch of phone calls, tracking down buyers and asking them. It's just reading the data and understanding what it says and what that means for you and your investment strategy in that area.
Absolutely.
And this is something that certainly you can apply when you're going into a new market virtually from wherever you are, or you can apply it in your own market. And you shared with me that you had just recently done this again in your own local market, and maybe we could use that as an example.
Sure.
Could you tell me what your starting point was there? When you decided, all right, I'm going to mine through the data in my market and find out what's going on, find out where the action is and what the numbers tell me. Where did you start and what did you do first?
Well, I'll tell you exactly why I did it. It was kind of like a wake-up call from a recent deal that I've been negotiating on, and I've been negotiating on it for the longest time. I actually ended up not getting the deal, but I learned a lot from it, and I learned actually a heck of a lot from it in so many different aspects. This guy contacted me from a postcard, and usually, because I'm such an avid direct mailer, I'm usually the first one notified on a deal, and then usually if it depends on the customer, or not the customer, the seller that you're dealing with, if they're going to shop everybody, if they're going to get as many postcards as they can and go through their Rolodex of people, or they're going to go to Yellow Pages, they're going to go on the internet. Turns out this guy did every single one of those things. There was just so much competition and there were so many people involved on it. And even though I was lower than the guy above me, to the tune of like $17,000, the owner still wanted to go with me on the deal. And I'm basically looking at the numbers here. The house is probably worth about $250 to $260, I would say. And the investor that had gone out there was willing to pay as much as $170,000 for this deal, which is extremely high. My initial offer on this deal was $120,000. And this guy was willing to pay all this money in the world for this deal. And that got me thinking. I said, all right, this dude is willing to pay this much for the property. And I went back and I said, okay, the property is about 1,596 square feet. He's buying it for $170,000. What is the price per square foot that this guy is buying it at? Do you have a calculator, JP? Or let me break out my iPhone here and see.
Yeah, break yours out. I'm pacing around with my index card taking notes.
Okay. All right. So we take 170,000 and we divide that by 1,596. If we're going to be exactly exact. I just did 1593. My big fat fingers. 1596. All right, there we go. That's $106.52 for that square footage on a house like that. That is extremely high.
Yeah, so you're thinking either this guy is an idiot or he knows something I don't know.
No, I'm thinking this guy is my next buyer for my next property. Yeah. So I said, okay, this is great. This guy's willing to pay this much. I'm not willing to settle for such a low yield on the property, because if I'm going to buy it for $170,000, put 30 to 40 into it and walk away with 20 to 30 on a rehab, I could take a $100,000 property, $150,000 property, and make the same amount of money, and my yield is so much better. And so why take a higher amount of money and make what you would have made on a smaller amount of money, risking a higher amount of money?
Right.
That's the way I think. But it got me thinking, and I said, okay, shoot. Let me look at this whole area as a whole and see what other investors are paying per square foot. And that got me thinking. I said, okay, well, let me look and see where all this activity is happening, and then look and see what the square footage is and what is the average square footage that these people are buying, and target a mailing that is directly targeted at that. I mean, I can niche this down to a subdivision and target everybody in that little circle there. I mean, normally data, when you work with data, you have to buy a whole bunch of it, and then you have to sift through it, or you mail the whole thing if you have a bigger budget. But what this allows you to do is kind of approach this from sort of a shotgun method, but sort of not, because you're hitting the subdivision has the most action, kind of weeding through it versus, LTV and price per square foot that the person bought at, who had the house, whether it was an absentee, whether it was a free and clear property, whatever it was, and sending out the mail that way. And then you say, okay, you send out the mail, a caller calls you now, a motivated seller calls you and says, hey, I've got this house. What will you pay for it? Well, you go to your magic little list that you find, and you see that Joe Blow is paying $106 a square foot for property. Offer him $90 a square foot. This could be extremely higher than everybody else out there. But if you know somebody's willing to pay that much per square footage, that's going to put you in a little bit better of a league than somebody who, to be honest with you, I'm just off my virtual assistant, and I'm probably going to switch this over actually. My virtual assistant has been offering based on LTV, and he normally takes 65 to 70%, subtracts repairs from that number, an average of about 30,000. And again, that should be based on square footage, so we're going to probably change that around, and comes out with a number. And usually it's really low, and they'll more often than not than say no to it. But maybe this is an approach that can be used to get more offers accepted and more deals done by looking at it in a very strategic manner. Are you with
So you're going to look through like a zip code or a subdivision or a school district for this type of approach?
I would say start with zip code.
Okay.
Because then you can really drill down to what you could say, okay, let's look at a whole area, let's say. And like I was telling you, I was saying, okay, before, let's look at Timbuktu. And let's say Timbuktu is the area. All right. Well, then there's J.P. Moses Land, which is a city in Timbuktu. Okay. So, and we find that within J.P. Moses Land, there's a bunch of zip codes within this area. Then I could say, okay, let me look and see which zip code in this area, because J.P. Moses Land seems to be having the most action than every other zip area out there. I'm going to drill down further into it and see which zip codes are carrying the most action. And then if you really wanted to, you could go from the zip codes and drill it down to the subdivision, depending on what your budget is and how wide you want to go with it.
So I'm going to ask you in a minute to outline how you do this data mining, but just in order to further understand the concept. So as you mine down into, let's say, this zip code eventually.
Yes.
At that point, you're basically going to say, all right, who's buying, who's paying cash, so who are the players, and especially anybody who's bought more than once. And then Absolutely. You're going to look at what they bought, and you're going to start making note of how much per square foot obviously property type and just trying to kind of get inside their head and see maybe what kind of investor they are and what they're thinking, what they're doing. But you're making note, especially for purposes of this discussion, of how much per square foot they paid for that property.
Absolutely.
Now, what you don't know is whether that property was in great shape and only needed $5,000 worth of work, or if it was a total junker. So how does that unknown factor?
I have yet to see a house that just requires $5,000 worth of work. And here's also the kicker on that. You will be able to tell by the square footage prices. They all will line up, within a certain amount, and they don't vary that much in investor land, basically. And that usually has to do with the year that the property was built. So now, again, you see that houses built from 1940 to 1960 are getting the most action investor-wise. Houses built in 1940 to 1960 are usually going to need a full rehab, and not necessarily a rehab, but a full remodel. You could have a sink, a bathroom that's nice. The blue tile might be nice. It may be in great shape. The toilet is blue and it looks great and it doesn't have any cracks and it's not leaking, but we still have to rip it out. We still got to fix it because it's not updated. So, a house that's even in okay shape, you still got to go through and spend an easy $25,000, $30,000. And that all comes again down to square footage. You can say, that one's hard to say, is how much are they investing into the square footage when they're fixing the property. Is it $20 a square foot? So if you have a 2,000 square foot property, you're spending $40,000. And for me, that sounds about right. If somebody's spending $40,000 on a 2,000 square foot house, that gives you an idea, of what people are thinking. The numbers don't change too much from investors on how much they're spending.